What if I told you that right now, as you're watching this video, there's a 1 in 4 chance that your login credentials are already sitting in a criminal database waiting to be sold for just $10? And what if I told you that this isn't some distant future threat, but a reality that's already infected over 23 million devices in 2024 alone? Welcome back to Cybercrime Chronicles. Today we're diving deep into the Infostealer Malware Epidemic. The Silent Account Takeover Crisis, a threat that's not just growing, it's exploding at a rate that's leaving even cybersecurity experts stunned. Let me paint you a picture of just how massive this crisis has become. In 2024, Infostealer malware infected 23 million host systems worldwide. That's not a typo, 23 million. But here's where it gets terrifying. These infections didn't just steal random data, they harvested a staggering 2.1 billion credentials, passwords, usernames, session tokens, and authentication cookies from real people, real businesses, and real organizations. To put this in perspective, that's roughly 1 credential for every 4 people on Earth. And we're not talking about old, outdated passwords. We're talking about active, current login information that criminals are using right now to break into accounts, steal money, and destroy lives. But the most chilling part? Most victims have absolutely no idea they've been compromised until it's far too late. So what exactly is Infostealer malware, and why is it so devastatingly effective? Infostealers are a specialized type of malware designed with one primary purpose: to silently extract and exfiltrate sensitive information from infected systems. Unlike ransomware that announces its presence by locking your files or adware that bombards you with pop-ups, Infostealers operate in the shadows, working quietly in the background while you go about your daily digital life. These malicious programs are programmed to target specific types of data that criminals value most. They focus primarily on web browser data, your saved passwords, cookies, autofill information, and browsing history. But modern Infostealers don't stop there. They're sophisticated enough to steal cryptocurrency wallet data, email credentials, social media accounts, banking information, and even files stored on your desktop. What makes Infostealers particularly dangerous is their stealth capability. They're designed to be lightweight, fast, and virtually invisible to the average user. Many operate without causing any noticeable system slowdown, unusual behavior, or warning signs. Your computer runs normally, your browsers work fine, and meanwhile, everything you type, save, or access is being quietly copied and transmitted to criminal servers. The technical sophistication of these tools has reached alarming levels. Modern Infostealers can extract data from multiple browsers simultaneously, decrypt saved passwords, capture screenshots, record keystrokes, and even steal multi-factor authentication tokens. Some variants can persist through system reboots, hide from antivirus software, and update themselves remotely to avoid detection. The numbers surrounding the Infostealer epidemic are nothing short of staggering, and they're getting worse every month. According to multiple cybersecurity research firms, Infostealer attacks grew by 58% in 2024, compared to the previous year. But that's just the beginning of this alarming trend. KeyLog's 2025 Cybersecurity report reveals that 4.3 million devices were infected with Infostealer malware throughout 2024, resulting in 330 million stolen credentials. That's an average of over 76 credentials stolen per infected device. Think about that for a moment. Every person who gets infected doesn't just lose one password. They lose dozens of accounts across multiple platforms. Flashpoint's research team documented that Infostealers infected 23 million hosts and harvested 2.1 billion credentials in 2024. To understand the scale of this theft, consider that these stolen credentials represent access to email accounts, social media profiles, banking platforms, corporate networks, and e-commerce sites. Each stolen credential is a digital key that opens doors to someone's financial life, personal communications, and professional data. But perhaps the most disturbing statistic comes from recent discoveries by cybersecurity researchers. In June 2025, investigators uncovered online datasets containing 16 billion exposed account credentials. These massive databases included log-in information for major platforms like Apple, Google, and Facebook. The sheer volume of this data represents years of accumulated theft, much of it harvested by Infostealer malware campaigns. The geographic distribution of these attacks is global, but certain regions show higher concentration rates. According to Keela's research, personal computers represent the largest category of infected systems, accounting for 35.7% of all cases. Personal shared computers follow at 29%, highlighting how infostealers spread through household networks and shared devices. What's particularly concerning is that these statistics only represent the attacks that researchers have been able to document and track. The actual numbers are likely much higher, as many infostealer infections go undetected for months or even years. This brings us to the heart of what we're discussing today, the Infostealer Malware Epidemic, the Silent Account Takeover Crisis. This isn't just a cybersecurity problem, it's a fundamental threat to how we live and work in the digital age. Chapter 1. The Underground Economy: How Criminals Monetize Stolen Data. Behind every infostealer infection lies a sophisticated criminal economy that most people never see. This underground marketplace operates on the dark web, where stolen credentials are bought and sold like commodities on a stock exchange. Understanding how this economy works reveals why infostealer malware has become such a profitable and persistent threat. The economics of credential theft are brutally simple and highly profitable. Research shows that stolen login credentials can be purchased for as little as $10 per log, industry terminology for a collection of data stolen from a single infected device. These logs typically contain dozens of username and password combinations, making each individual credential worth mere cents to criminals. Russian Market, one of the most prominent dark web marketplaces, exemplifies how this economy operates. The platform allows infostealer distributors to bulk upload stolen logs, which are then sold for around $10 each. Buyers can search through these logs to identify specific credential sets they're interested in, much like searching for products on a legitimate e-commerce site. The platform's user interface is surprisingly professional, complete with search filters, customer ratings, and bulk pricing discounts. But the real money in infostealer operations isn't in selling individual credentials, it's in the scale and volume of operations. Consider the mathematics. If a single infostealer campaign infects 100,000 devices and harvests an average of 76 credentials per device, that's 7.6 million stolen credentials. Sold at bulk rates of even 0.1 per credential, that represents $76,000 in revenue from a single campaign. The subscription-based model of modern infostealer malware makes these operations even more profitable. Many infostealers are now offered as Malware-as-a-Service, MaaS, where criminals can rent access to sophisticated malware tools for as little as $200 per month. This low barrier to entry has democratized cybercrime, allowing even inexperienced criminals to launch large-scale data theft operations. The downstream effects of this economy are where the real damage occurs. Stolen credentials are used for account takeovers, identity theft, financial fraud, and as entry points for more sophisticated attacks. A single set of corporate credentials can provide access to an entire organization's network, potentially leading to ransomware attacks, intellectual property theft, or massive data breaches. Financial institutions have reported that infostealer harvested credentials are increasingly being used for fraudulent transactions. E-commerce platforms see these credentials used for unauthorized purchases and account hijacking. Social media companies deal with waves of compromised accounts being used for spam, scams, and influence operations. The speed at which stolen credentials are monetized is also accelerating. Security researchers have observed stolen data appearing on dark web marketplaces within hours of being harvested. This rapid turnaround time means that victims have very little opportunity to detect and respond to compromises before their accounts are actively being exploited. Chapter 2. Infection Methods: How Infostealers Spread. Understanding how infostealer malware spreads is crucial for both individual users and organizations trying to protect themselves. These malicious programs use a diverse array of infection vectors, many of which exploit human psychology rather than technical vulnerabilities. Phishing emails remain one of the most common infection methods. Criminals craft convincing messages that appear to come from legitimate sources, banks, social media platforms, or popular services. These emails typically contain malicious attachments or links to compromised websites that automatically download infostealer payloads. The sophistication of these phishing campaigns has increased dramatically, with criminals using artificial intelligence to create highly personalized messages that are difficult to distinguish from legitimate communications. Software piracy and cracked applications represent another major infection vector. Criminals embed infostealer malware into popular software that users download from unofficial sources. Gaming software, creative applications like Photoshop alternatives, and productivity tools are common targets for this distribution method. Users seeking free versions of expensive software unknowingly install malware alongside the applications they want. Malicious advertisements, or malvertising, have become increasingly prevalent. Criminals purchase advertising space on legitimate websites and use these ads to distribute infostealer malware. These advertisements often masquerade as software updates, security alerts, or fake download buttons. Even visiting reputable websites can result in infection if users interact with compromised advertisements. Social media platforms have also become distribution channels for infostealer malware. Criminals create fake profiles and share links to malicious content, often disguised as trending news, entertainment, or free software offers. The viral nature of social media helps these campaigns reach thousands of potential victims quickly. USB and removable media infections, while less common than online methods, remain a significant threat in certain environments. Criminals load infostealer malware onto USB drives and leave them in public places, hoping curious individuals will plug them into their computers. This method is particularly effective in corporate environments where employees might assume the USB drive belongs to a colleague. Supply chain attacks represent a more sophisticated infection method where criminals compromise legitimate software distribution channels. By infiltrating the servers of software vendors or compromising software update mechanisms, criminals can distribute infostealer malware through channels that users trust implicitly. The technical execution of these infections has become increasingly sophisticated. Modern infostealers often use multiple stages of infection to avoid detection. The initial payload might be a small downloader that appears harmless to antivirus software. Once executed, this downloader retrieves the actual infostealer payload from criminal-controlled servers, making detection and analysis more difficult. Many infostealers also employ encryption and obfuscation techniques to hide their true purpose. They might masquerade as legitimate system files, use names similar to real Windows processes, or hide within legitimate software installations. Some variants can detect if they're running in virtual machines or security analysis environments and will refuse to execute, making them harder for researchers to study. Chapter 3. Real-world impact stories. The abstract statistics of billions of stolen credentials become much more tangible when we examine real-world cases of how infostealer malware has impacted individuals and organizations. Consider the case of a small marketing agency in Denver that discovered their entire client database had been compromised through an Infostealer infection. An employee had downloaded what appeared to be a legitimate design software update, but the file contained RedLine Infostealer malware. Within hours, the malware had harvested login credentials for the agency's project management systems, client communication platforms, and financial accounts. The criminals used these credentials to access client projects, steal proprietary marketing strategies, and attempt to transfer funds from the agency's accounts. The incident resulted in the loss of multiple major clients and nearly forced the agency to close. In the healthcare sector, a pediatric clinic in Texas experienced a devastating breach when Infostealer malware infected a reception computer. The malware stole administrative credentials that provided access to patient records, insurance information, and billing systems. Criminals used this access to file fraudulent insurance claims and sold patient data on dark web marketplaces. The clinic faced regulatory fines, lawsuits from affected families, and had to invest heavily in new security systems and legal fees. Educational institutions have been particularly vulnerable to Infostealer attacks. A community college in Ohio discovered that Infostealer malware had infected multiple student and faculty computers, harvesting credentials for the school's learning management system, email servers, and financial aid platforms. Criminals used faculty credentials to access and modify student grades, steal financial aid information, and impersonate professors in email scams targeting students and parents. The personal impact on individual victims can be equally devastating. A retired teacher in Florida had her entire digital life compromised when Infostealer malware infected her home computer. The malware stole credentials for her banking accounts, social media profiles, email, and online shopping accounts. Within days, criminals had drained her savings account, used her credit cards for fraudulent purchases, and impersonated her on social media to scam her friends and family members. The financial and emotional recovery took over a year and required extensive legal assistance. Corporate executives have become high-value targets for Infostealer campaigns. A manufacturing company CEO had his laptop infected with information-stealing malware during a business trip after connecting to what he believed was the hotel's Wi-Fi network. The malware harvested credentials for corporate systems, email accounts, and cloud storage platforms. Criminals used this access to steal intellectual property, intercept confidential business communications, and attempt to manipulate stock prices through strategic information leaks. These cases illustrate how Infostealer infections often cascade into much larger security incidents. What begins as malware on a single computer can quickly expand to compromise entire networks, customer databases, and business operations. The interconnected nature of modern digital systems means that a single set of stolen credentials can provide criminals with access to vast amounts of sensitive information and critical systems. Chapter 4. The Precursor to Ransomware. One of the most alarming trends that cybersecurity researchers have identified is the increasing use of Infostealer malware as a precursor to ransomware attacks. This connection transforms what might seem like a simple credential theft into the opening move of a much more devastating cyber attack. SpyCloud's comprehensive analysis revealed that Infostealer infections preceded nearly one-third of ransomware events for North American and European companies in 2023. This statistic represents a fundamental shift in how sophisticated cyber criminal groups operate. Rather than attempting to breach organizations through external attacks, criminals are now using Infostealer malware to harvest legitimate credentials that provide authorized access to target networks. The methodology behind these combined attacks is particularly insidious. Criminal organizations deploy Infostealer malware through various infection vectors, often targeting employees of specific organizations they want to compromise. Once the malware harvests corporate credentials, the criminals don't immediately use them. Instead, they may wait weeks or months, allowing the initial infection to go undetected while they plan their ransomware deployment. Common Infostealer variants like Raccoon, Vidar, and RedLine have been specifically linked to subsequent ransomware attacks. These malware families are particularly effective at harvesting VPN credentials, remote desktop login information, and privileged account access that ransomware operators need to move laterally through corporate networks. The timeline of these attacks reveals their calculated nature. Researchers have documented cases where Infostealer infections occurred months before the related ransomware deployment. During this dormant period, criminals used the stolen credentials to conduct reconnaissance, map network architectures, identify valuable data repositories, and plan their attack strategies. This extended preparation time significantly increases the effectiveness and impact of the eventual ransomware attack. The financial implications of this trend are staggering. Organizations that experience ransomware attacks following Infostealer infections face not only the direct costs of ransom payments and system recovery, but also the broader impacts of prolonged data theft and network compromise. The extended timeline means that criminals may have exfiltrated vast amounts of sensitive data before deploying the ransomware, creating multiple vectors for ongoing damage. Insurance companies have begun recognizing this connection and adjusting their coverage policies accordingly. Many cyber insurance policies now specifically address Infostealer infections as a precursor risk, requiring organizations to implement additional monitoring and response capabilities to detect and remediate these infections before they escalate into ransomware incidents. The detection challenge is particularly acute because traditional security tools are often focused on identifying and stopping ransomware at the point of deployment, not on detecting the Infostealer infections that may have occurred months earlier. This creates a significant blind spot in organizational security postures that sophisticated criminal groups are increasingly exploiting. Chapter 5. Corporate and Government Impact. The impact of Infostealer malware extends far beyond individual consumers, creating serious national security and economic implications. Government agencies, defense contractors, and critical infrastructure providers have all become targets of sophisticated Infostealer campaigns designed to harvest sensitive credentials and facilitate espionage operations. Federal agencies have reported increasing incidents of Infostealer infections affecting government contractors and suppliers. These infections often target employees who work on classified projects or have access to sensitive government systems. The stolen credentials can provide foreign adversaries with unauthorized access to defense technologies, intelligence operations, and critical infrastructure controls. Corporate environments face unique challenges from Infostealer infections due to the interconnected nature of modern business systems. A single infected employee workstation can provide criminals with access to cloud platforms, customer databases, financial systems, and intellectual property repositories. The average cost of remediating an Infostealer infection in a corporate environment has risen to over $2.4 million when accounting for incident response, system recovery, customer notification, and regulatory compliance requirements. Financial services institutions represent particularly attractive targets for Infostealer operations. Banks, credit unions, and investment firms process vast amounts of sensitive financial data and maintain high-value customer accounts. Criminals use stolen employee credentials to access internal banking systems, manipulate transactions, and steal customer information for identity theft and financial fraud operations. Healthcare organizations have experienced devastating impacts from Infostealer infections. Medical facilities rely on interconnected systems for patient care, billing, and communication. When Infostealer malware compromises healthcare networks, it can disrupt patient care, expose protected health information, and create life-threatening situations when critical systems become unavailable. The supply chain implications of Infostealer infections are particularly concerning. Large corporations often require suppliers and contractors to access shared systems and databases. When these third-party organizations become infected with Infostealer malware, the compromise can cascade through entire supply chains, affecting multiple companies and potentially exposing sensitive information across entire industry sectors. Educational institutions have emerged as frequent targets due to their typically limited cybersecurity resources, combined with valuable research data and personal information repositories. Universities conducting sensitive research or maintaining alumni databases with wealthy donors have found their systems compromised through Infostealer infections that initially targeted individual faculty or student computers. Chapter 6. Detection Challenges. One of the most frustrating aspects of the Infostealer epidemic is how difficult these infections are to detect using traditional cybersecurity tools. Unlike other forms of malware that cause obvious system problems or performance issues, Infostealers are designed to operate completely invisibly to end users. Traditional antivirus software struggles with modern Infostealers due to their sophisticated evasion techniques. Many variants use encryption, code obfuscation, and polymorphic code that changes with each infection to avoid signature-based detection. Some Infostealers can detect when they're running in virtual machines or security analysis environments and will simply refuse to execute, making them nearly impossible for automated security tools to analyze. The behavioral patterns of Infostealer malware also make detection difficult. These programs typically don't modify system files, install persistent services, or create obvious network traffic patterns. They operate by reading existing browser databases and configuration files, activities that appear completely normal to security monitoring systems. Network-based detection faces similar challenges. Infostealer malware typically transmits stolen data using encrypted connections to legitimate-appearing websites or cloud services. The traffic volume is usually small and intermittent, making it difficult to distinguish from normal web browsing or application updates. Endpoint detection and response, EDR solutions, have shown more promise in identifying Infostealer infections, but they require sophisticated configuration and skilled analysts to be effective. Many organizations lack the resources to properly deploy and to monitor these advanced security tools, leaving them vulnerable to undetected infections. The time gap between infection and detection compounds these challenges. Security researchers have documented cases where Infostealer malware operated undetected for over 18 months, continuously harvesting new credentials as users updated passwords and created new accounts. During this extended period, the volume of compromised data grows exponentially, making the eventual cleanup and recovery process much more complex and expensive. User education represents another significant challenge in detection. Most people have no idea that their computers might be infected with Infostealer malware because these infections typically do not cause any noticeable symptoms. Browsers continue to work normally, computers don't slow down, and users don't receive any warning messages. This invisible operation allows Infostealers to continue operating indefinitely until external events, like fraudulent account activity or data breach notifications, alert victims to the compromise. Chapter 7. Prevention Strategies. Despite the sophisticated nature of modern Infostealer threats, there are concrete steps that individuals and organizations can take to significantly reduce their risk of infection and limit the damage from successful attacks. At the individual level, the most important prevention strategy is developing healthy skepticism about unexpected emails, downloads, and offers. Users should verify the authenticity of software updates by downloading them directly from official vendor websites rather than clicking on email links or pop-up advertisements. Free software offers, especially for expensive applications like Adobe Creative Suite or Microsoft Office, should be treated with extreme suspicion. Browser security configurations play a crucial role in infostealer prevention. Users should disable the automatic saving of passwords in browsers and instead use dedicated password managers that offer better security protections. Regular clearing of browser cookies, saved form data, and cached files can limit the amount of valuable information available to steal if an infection does occur. Multi-factor authentication, MFA, represents one of the most effective defenses against the misuse of stolen credentials. Even when infostealer malware harvests username and password combinations, MFA requirements can prevent unauthorized access to accounts. However, users must be aware that some advanced infostealers can capture MFA tokens and cookies, so hardware-based authentication methods offer superior protection. Software management practices significantly impact infostealer risk. Users should maintain updated operating systems and applications, as many infostealers exploit known software vulnerabilities for initial access. Automatic update mechanisms should be enabled for operating systems, browsers, and security software. Third-party software should be minimized and obtained only from official sources. For organizations, employee education represents the most critical prevention strategy. Regular training sessions should cover current threat trends, social engineering tactics, and safe computing practices. Simulated phishing exercises can help identify employees who need additional training and to measure the effectiveness of security awareness programs. Technical controls in corporate environments should include advanced endpoint protection solutions that can detect behavioral indicators of infostealer infections. Network monitoring should include analysis of outbound traffic patterns that might indicate data exfiltration. Access controls should implement the principle of least privilege, limiting the potential damage from compromised credentials. Incident response planning should specifically address infostealer infections. Organizations need predefined procedures for credential rotation, account monitoring, and system isolation when infections are detected. The extended timeline of infostealer operations means that response procedures must account for the possibility that infections may have been active for months before detection. Chapter 8, Response and Recovery. When individuals or organizations discover they've been compromised by infostealer malware, the response must be swift, comprehensive, and methodical. The extended timeframes typical of these infections mean that the scope of compromise may be much broader than initially apparent. Immediate response actions should focus on preventing further damage. Infected systems must be isolated from networks to prevent lateral movement of criminals who may have gained access using stolen credentials. All potentially compromised accounts should be secured immediately through password changes, session termination, and MFA implementation. The credential audit process represents one of the most challenging aspects of infostealer response. Victims must identify all accounts that may have been compromised, which often includes dozens or hundreds of online services, applications, and systems. Password managers can help with this process by providing comprehensive lists of stored accounts, but many users don't maintain complete inventories of their online accounts. Financial account monitoring becomes critical following an infostealer infection. Victims should immediately contact banks, credit card companies, and other financial institutions to report the potential compromise and request enhanced monitoring. Credit reports should be obtained and frozen to prevent identity theft. Investment accounts, retirement funds, and insurance policies should all be reviewed for unauthorized changes or access. For organizations, the response process must include comprehensive forensic analysis to determine the full scope of the compromise. This analysis should identify what data was accessed, which systems were compromised, and whether the infection was used as a precursor to other attacks. Legal and regulatory notification requirements must be evaluated, as many jurisdictions require disclosure of data breaches within specific timeframes. The recovery process often takes months or years to complete fully. Victims must not only change all potentially compromised credentials, but also monitor for ongoing misuse of stolen information. Identity theft, financial fraud, and account takeovers may continue long after the initial infection is cleaned up, requiring ongoing vigilance and response. System rebuilding should be considered for severely compromised environments. Simply removing the Infostealer malware may not eliminate all evidence of compromise, and criminals may have installed additional backdoors or monitoring tools. Complete system rebuilding from known clean backups may be necessary to ensure full recovery. Chapter 9: The Future of Infostealer Threats. The trajectory of Infostealer malware development suggests that this threat will continue to evolve and expand in the coming years. Several technological and criminal trends are converging to make these attacks more sophisticated, more difficult to detect, and more damaging to victims. Artificial intelligence integration represents a significant emerging threat. Criminal developers are beginning to incorporate AI capabilities into Infostealer malware to improve evasion techniques, optimize data collection, and enhance the value of stolen information. AI-powered Infostealers might analyze stolen data in real time to identify the most valuable credentials, automatically attempt to exploit compromised accounts, and adapt their behavior to avoid detection. Cloud service integration is making Infostealers more effective and harder to combat. As more personal and business activities move to cloud platforms, Infostealers are evolving to target cloud-based authentication tokens, API keys, and service credentials. These cloud-focused attacks can provide criminals with access to vast amounts of data and computing resources while being extremely difficult to trace and stop. Mobile device targeting represents another frontier for Infostealer development. As smartphones and tablets become primary computing devices for many users, criminals are developing mobile variants of Infostealer malware. These mobile Infostealers can harvest app credentials, capture two-factor authentication codes, and monitor financial transactions conducted through mobile banking applications. The criminal ecosystem supporting Infostealer operations continues to mature and expand. More sophisticated marketplaces are emerging with better search capabilities, quality ratings, and specialized services. Some criminal groups now offer credential testing services where they verify that stolen login information is still valid before selling it, increasing the value and effectiveness of purchased credentials. Cryptocurrency integration is making Infostealer operations more profitable and harder to trace. Many Infostealers now specifically target cryptocurrency, wallet credentials, private keys, and exchange account information. The irreversible nature of cryptocurrency transactions makes these thefts particularly devastating for victims and attractive for criminals. Chapter 10: Industry Response and Regulatory Implications. The cybersecurity industry and regulatory bodies are beginning to recognize the unique challenges posed by Infostealer malware and are developing specialized responses to address this threat category. Security vendors are investing heavily in developing detection capabilities specifically designed for Infostealer threats. These solutions focus on behavioral analysis, network traffic inspection, and dark web monitoring to identify potential infections and compromised credentials. Some vendors now offer services that continuously monitor criminal marketplaces for stolen credentials associated with their customers' domains and alert them when compromises are discovered. Financial institutions are implementing enhanced monitoring systems designed to detect account takeovers resulting from stolen credentials. These systems analyze login patterns, device fingerprints, and transaction behaviors to identify potentially fraudulent access. Many banks now require additional verification when users attempt to access accounts from new devices or locations, even when correct credentials are provided. Regulatory responses are beginning to address the infostealer threat through updated compliance requirements and breach notification standards. Some jurisdictions are considering regulations that would require organizations to monitor for stolen employee credentials and take proactive steps to protect against credential-based attacks. International law enforcement cooperation is increasing to combat the global nature of infostealer operations. Joint investigations involving multiple countries are disrupting criminal marketplaces and arresting key operators. However, the distributed and anonymized nature of these operations makes law enforcement response challenging and often ineffective. Industry information sharing initiatives are helping organizations better understand and respond to infostealer threats. Threat intelligence sharing platforms now include specific feeds focused on compromised credentials and infostealer campaign indicators. These collaborative efforts help organizations identify and respond to threats more quickly than would be possible through individual detection efforts. As we've explored throughout this deep dive into the Infostealer Malware Epidemic, the Silent Account Takeover Crisis, the scope and impact of this threat cannot be overstated. We're facing a crisis that has already compromised billions of credentials and shows no signs of slowing down. The statistics we've examined today paint a clear picture. 4.3 million devices infected, 330 million credentials stolen, and a criminal economy that generates millions of dollars monthly from this stolen information. But behind every statistic is a real person whose digital life has been violated, whose financial security has been threatened, and whose privacy has been destroyed. What makes this crisis particularly urgent is its invisible nature. Unlike ransomware that announces itself with frightening messages or viruses that slow down your computer, infostealer malware operates completely silently. Right now, as you're watching this video, millions of computers worldwide are infected with these programs, quietly harvesting every password, every login, every piece of sensitive information their users enter. The connection between infostealer infections and subsequent ransomware attacks adds another layer of urgency to this threat. What begins as a simple credential theft can escalate into organization-wide ransomware incidents that cost millions of dollars and disrupt critical services. The 30% of ransomware attacks that are preceded by infostealer infections represent a fundamental shift in how cybercriminals operate. But despite the alarming scale of this threat, knowledge and preparation can make a significant difference. The prevention strategies we've discussed, skepticism about unexpected downloads, proper browser security configurations, multi-factor authentication, and regular software updates can dramatically reduce your risk of becoming a victim. For organizations, the message is equally clear. Infostealer threats require specialized attention and response capabilities. Traditional antivirus software and basic security measures are insufficient against these sophisticated threats. Investment in advanced endpoint detection, employee education, and incident response planning is not optional. It's essential for survival in today's threat landscape. If this investigation into the infostealer epidemic has opened your eyes to the scale and sophistication of this threat, I need you to take action right now. Don't let this be another video you watch and forget about. First, share this video with everyone in your network, your family, your colleagues, your friends. The invisible nature of infostealer threats means that most people have no idea this epidemic is happening. Your sharing could prevent someone you care about from becoming the next victim. Second, subscribe to Cybercrime Chronicles and hit that notification bell. The cyber threat landscape is evolving rapidly, and staying informed about current threats is your best defense against becoming a victim. We're committed to bringing you the latest research, real-world cases, and expert analysis that you need to protect yourself and your organization. Third, Take immediate action to secure your own digital life. Check if your email addresses have been compromised by visiting reputable breach notification services. Enable multi-factor authentication on all your important accounts. Stop saving passwords in your browser and start using a dedicated password manager. These simple steps could be the difference between staying safe and becoming another statistic in the Infostealer epidemic. Fourth, if you're responsible for cybersecurity in your organization, use this information to advocate for improved security measures. Share this video with your leadership team. Update your incident response procedures to address Infostealer threats specifically, and invest in the advanced detection capabilities your organization needs to identify these invisible infections before they escalate into catastrophic breaches. The Infostealer Malware Epidemic. The Silent Account Takeover Crisis is happening right now, and it's affecting millions of people worldwide. But armed with knowledge, proper security practices, and ongoing vigilance, we can protect ourselves and our organizations from becoming the next victims. Thank you for watching Cybercrime Chronicles. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay safe in the digital world. We'll see you in the next investigation.